Okay, I'm just gonna get started here. I think I've started this video about 10 times and trying to say the right thing, but I don't know how to do it, so I'm just gonna start talking. So I'm starting some videos to kind of share what has been going on in my life. I've had an amazing life and I've learned so much, and I want to share it with you. So I have been a nurse for 36 years. I worked on surgery and medicine and emerge and continuing care. And then I started working on palliative care. And that job changed my life. I loved it. I took a palliative care course at Lambton College. And then I got started on working on a palliative care unit. That was in 1992. And it was the perfect job for me. And so when I first started working there, I seen a young mom standing in the doorway of her room, and she had her 2-year-old son on her hip. And I thought she was so frail. How could she even hold him? So as we were talking, I found out that her son and my daughter were exactly the same age. I thought that could be me standing in the doorway of that room. My husband is awesome, but who would look after my 2 babies if something happened to me? So that beautiful woman died 2 weeks after I met her of liver cancer, leaving 4 young boys behind. I knew at that moment that this job was going to change my life because I decided I would help the children who were passing through the palliative care unit. So I started to get every bit of education I could get. I took a course on bereavement studies. And luckily, I paid for all 10 courses ahead of time because it was cheaper. And thank goodness I did because the first one was so hard. I probably wouldn't have completed it if I hadn't paid for them all. So I would take the courses and do it at night when my children went to bed. So I'd be up till like 1 o'clock in the morning writing papers and studying. It was an amazing course. Dr. Jack Morgan was one of the teachers, and he's a well-known bereavement specialist at King's College. It's fantastic. Then I took some courses with Alan Wolfeld. So I have a certificate from Alan Wolfeld, and oh my gosh, I think it took me 10 years to get all the sessions in to complete that certificate. I took trauma training, so I now have my child trauma specialist certificate and a school trauma specialist certificate. So along the years, I've taken as much education as that's been there because I wanted to do everything I could do to help. So that's kind of where I am right now. When I remember years ago, and it probably 15 years ago easily now, I was working with one little girl, and her dad had dropped her off at school, and then he had gone home and he had killed himself. And so I worked with her to work through her feelings and kind of deal with the horrible thing that had happened in her life. And it had been about um, 2 months. I think we'd been working together and meeting weekly and kind of working through those difficult times. And she looked up at me and she said, Connie, she said, when I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to do what you do. I want to help children. And at that moment, I went out and sat in my car and cried because that's what I had wanted to do. That was my dream. That was my goal all those years ago, was to help children. Um, One of the things that I did, I wrote a presentation called Children, the Forgotten Mourners, because often when someone is dying, they kind of forget about the children and they really need help along the way. So I wrote a presentation. Humber College had a huge palliative care conference in Toronto, and I went and presented my presentation there, um, I was terrified. It was the first time I'd ever spoke in public, and there were 4 people in my group, and the one was a world traveler. She had presented all over the world. One was a professor at Harvard, and the other was an expert in her field. And here I was with a few sheets of paper and a dream. And it turned out for all the presentations at that conference, I won Best Oral Presentation, just speaking from the heart. And that really got me going on this topic. And so I've presented from Corner Brook, Newfoundland to Victoria, BC to Bristol, England, speaking on children and grief. So what I like to do is to teach by telling stories. So I have so many stories of children and what they've been through and what they've taught me, and that's how we learn. Um, they're sad stories, very sad, but I don't want you to walk away and say, oh, that was a sad story. I want you to walk away and take what they've taught you from their suffering. And I have so many stories to share, and each one will teach you so that another little child isn't hurting, and they're very proud of that. I remember talking to a young boy once, and we were discussing should children be there when someone dies? And he was 13, almost 14 years old, and he was there. He came to me and he said, Connie, I was there when my mom died. I was right there. And he said, what I remember was just before she died, she looked at me and she said, I love you. And he said, I love you back. He said, yeah, there was some awful stuff afterwards. He said, but I don't remember that. He said, what I remember is my mom telling me that she loved me, and I told her that back. He said, so if anybody asks, should you be there? He said, you tell them yes, because that's very important. And they want to help others, and they want to teach others, and that's important. So this is like #1 video of many to come. I've decided I'm going to start my next video with how to help children when someone dies, because that's what I get all the time. I'll get a call and say, oh, Connie, someone has died. Like can I help the children? And I guess something I forgot to mention while we're talking is I wrote a book called I Know Someone Who Died. I also wrote another book called it's a little it's a little boy's book, and it's how to help someone who dies. And then I wrote 2 Memories of Mom and Memories of Dad. But the one I Know Someone Who Died was published by Insight Books, and that was a whole story that we'll talk about. But that book, I made it, and I had been selling it, and then I wanted to get it published, so I sent it to all kinds of publishing companies, and I have a really nice pile of rejection letters at home saying, they're not interested in this book. But then I met Doug Manning, who came to speak at a Mackenzie Blended Funeral Home at a presentation on grief, and Doug Manning spoke. He's from Oklahoma, no relation at all, and he took my book back to Oklahoma, and they wanted to publish it. And he said because of the Oklahoma City bombings, where so many children died, they understand the need for children to have support in their grief. So they published it. So that was in 1998, I think it is. And when I talked to them last year, they said they've sold probably about 20,000 books. So my book, my dream, has been in the hands of at least 20,000 children, and that is amazing. And so, so when people call and they tell me that someone has died and they want my book, there's a little bit more that I tell them that to do that they can help. So that's going to be my next video. So we'll start with that. So thanks for listening. This is one of many. I hope it goes really well. I'm not great at editing, so we take it as it comes. So this is the end of number 1, and we'll see you in number 2.